We'll move on to item 1, approval of the agenda. We do need to remove item 8A on the agenda.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve the agenda, eliminating item 8A.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Bellis and I.
Granger, aye.
Okay. This agenda is approved tonight. Item 2, announcements. Oath of office. We have a new council member. Grateful to have Kurt Ivey to join us. We will take care of that oath of office at this time. And our Judge Thad Segmiller, will do the duty. I don't even know the official word for that. Swear him in. There we go.
I, Kurt Ivey, do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Utah. I do also solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the laws, the Constitution, the laws and ordinances of Washington City, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Sign it and get up here, will you? Should do the work. Thank you. Thank you, Judge. We appreciate you doing that, taking time. Okay. We'll move on to item 4, declaration of abstentions and conflicts. Anything to declare at this time? Okay, if not, we'll move on to our consent agenda to approve the minutes from the city council meetings of 2/7/17 and 2/8/17.
I move approval of the minutes from 2/17 and 2/18 of 1/7.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Turek, aye.
Nice and I.
Bellis and I.
Granger, aye.
Okay, we'll move on to our finance report. Item 6, presentation of the second quarter budget review. Kimberly Roosh. Good evening,
Hello,
Kimberly.
Mayor and Council, thank you for this opportunity to come before you guys. This is our second quarter update regarding the 2017 budget. I'm going to share my screen, and some of these items that we'll kind of click through and give the quick little update on is available to all of our citizens, stakeholders, anybody who's interested, through our financial dashboard platform that we have that is hosted through OpenGov. And that is where all the charts and graphs that are going to be presented today come from. And for anybody who is interested, the link to that is found on our city website at washingtoncity.org/finance. So that's readily available. We update that information monthly, including all transactions. But we just formally come before the council once a quarter to kind of give you an update on that. Reset that really quick because I was doing a preview. Okay. So when you come to this landing page, it will simply let you know where the city is at from a revenue and expenditure standpoint. And then we have certain save views that will click through the various funds. And so my highlight that I do that's printed out that goes to you and the council kind of follows that same strategy in terms of looking at our funds collectively. And then the other thing with this view in terms of a presentation is that the budget column is presented in a year-to-date budget format. And so what that means is that the budget will show you where we would expect to be depending on the number of months that have elapsed. So this is looking at a 6-month budget basically for the city because we're in December. We're reporting for the second quarter for us, which ended December 30th. Or December 31st, excuse me. So as each month goes on, each fiscal period for us, that budget will adjust for the number of periods that have gone by so that you would be able to kind of see a levelized look of where you might expect us to be if we had, of course, equal revenue and expenditure spending throughout the year. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview. There are other financial reports that we produce that are available. This particular one that's the display that we're looking at is the year-to-date mode. For that. So I'll just start kind of giving you a couple of highlights. One thing we did want to point out that occurred for us in the second quarter of this year is we did have some bond refundings that the city completed that amounted to some savings that'll be over the life of the bonds for the city that are substantial and worth noting. I believe during the time when all that took place, you also received, some updated information, so I'm not going to spend any time on that because you are aware, but it did happen during the second quarter, so I did note it in the financial update regarding that. But as just a quick note for that, the water refundings that we did, we are expected to save about $1.7 million over the life of those bonds as a result of that refunding. And then on our Coral Canyon Special Service District, the net present value savings for that one is about $900,000. We did.
So combined, we're 2.6 thousand, or 2.6 million.
Yeah, savings. And so, but that information again is just highlighted also as a substantial item that occurred during that second quarter. So we're going to take a look really quickly at the general fund revenues. And for the general fund, actually, one thing that I like to point out is that about 86% of all of our general fund revenue actually comes from only two main categories, one being taxes and the other one being charges for services. So knowing that that accounts for the bulk of it, of course, during a lot of the review, those are categories that we're monitoring to make sure that they're coming in line with what our projections would be for the current year. So I did note that in regards to year-to-date budget, the revenue is about 6% below, and you can see that, where we're coming in just a little bit below budget on there. Now, the drivers behind that are that because we run off of a modified accrual accounting, we're not able to account for revenues until it's actually received. And so on our taxes, they report 2 months behind. And so once we get into June, you'll actually see 3 months worth of deposits that will come in that will account for year end to make up our stuff. So that's one reason. Again, it just has to do with the accounting periods that occur. But it's normal that we would expect to be about where we are for the year-to-date budget. And then you'll start to see that kind of normalize as the year progresses on. Let me see. We are tax collections are up a little over 1% compared to last year during the same time, and charges for services are up about 11.5%. Now, the biggest driver on the charges for services that's driving that increase is simply that we have our recycling fees that we collect, and those were not in place last year during the same reporting period. So July through December, we didn't have any of that coming in yet. And so that's the major drive that you're seeing on those increases associated with that. Okay, we're going to look at the general fund expenditures. Okay, and our general fund expenditures are reporting about just under 5%. It's 4.85% below the expected budget so far for the year. And again, it's primarily due to kind of some payroll timing. We have any new hires that we had budgeted for, they don't actually get out and get hired until January and beyond. And so we have an entire budget for that that's planned out, but expenditure-wise, you don't see that kicking in just yet. So mostly payroll costs kind of account for where we are year-to-date compared to the year-to-date budget on that. And that would be historical that you would see almost year after year because we do not do payroll cost adjustments in terms of any authorized pay increases that might have occurred They typically don't take place until after January so that we can make sure that the anticipated revenue for the city has been rolling in. We're just going to click over to, and if you have any questions along the way or anything that you noticed from the information I sent out, please feel free to
No,
ask
but
that
I
at any
do want
time.
to say I appreciate very much the summary that we got, the executive summary that we got with it. I thought that was extremely helpful.
Great, I'll
Thank you.
continue that.
Please.
As regard to the enterprise funds, that for us is, our electric, water, sewer, storm irrigation funds, and they function as proprietary, means our accounting practices for those are basically the same as a private business would function. We are, the year-to-date budget on our enterprise funds is above our anticipated collections by 4.68% for the first quarter, or excuse me, for the second quarter. And this is primarily the result of user fees that we collect. We have higher usage periods as the fiscal year begins because you're looking at July, August, September, which are still our peak usage for summer and watering consumption that occurs. So the first quarter when we reported, we were actually above our year-to-date collections by 11%. Now it's dropped down to 4.5%, and that's again because you're seeing we don't have consistent revenue, but it's not the same every 12 months. It will vary again based on usage and those types of charges. And so as the year progresses, that's when you start to see that level out. But we are reporting overall revenues being up in all of our enterprise funds. I noted those. The electric fund is up 12.38%. Now the reason for theirs in particular is we did have an electric rate increase that took place toward the latter end of last fiscal year. Water revenues are up 9.47%, sewer 3.5%, storm drain were 4.25%, and the irrigation was up 4% compared to last year, same time. And our enterprise funds in terms of expenditures, they are down 23% compared to the year-to-date budget. But that's natural result of capital project spending that we would see, and as well as, I pulled out capital projects and looked at it to kind of normalize, but you have your UAMPS expense, which is a large expense for the electric fund, and the billing cycle on that also reports in the arrears, and so it drives that to be a little bit off of what you'd expect the year-to-date budget to occur.
Kimberly, back to the last slide, the revenues that you said were up, 3-4%, that's largely due to new subscribers, correct?
So for all except for the electric fund, because the electric fund, we did have a rate increase, but the other funds, there were not any rate increases. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's new customers. It could also correlate to just increased consumption. So if you have water users that were using more water during the same time period, or we had more construction development going on, so you have more usage as a result of that, would be normally the two factors, either increased usage as well as a combination of actual customer growth.
Okay.
Then we're going to just jump down to our internal service funds. We actually have two. We have the fleet fund that functions as an internal, we have one left. We have the fleet fund that is an internal service fund, which just means they only do service for basically the city on those regards, with the exception of the sale of our natural gas. So we do have a public fueling station for natural gas that's out at the fleet yard that reports into this fund here as well.
I understand because gas is a little lower that our income is a little less.
Yes, and so I did note that we do have, let's see, what did I identify there? That we were down about 5% compared to the year-to-date budget, and when I look, it's directly related to lower fuel sale revenue. So the fuel sales in terms of the revenue coming in is lower than what we would have anticipated, but the driving factor is more cost. I have not gone in to confirm with the fleet division what their actual consumption sales are, if they're seeing overall sales down. But this also would include sales to the city, so we pump for our own fuels for all city vehicles, and those are also included. But the expense side of those fuel purchases, you would see, are directly down as well, because we're not having to buy the wholesale fuel to turn around and,
Do you think those two compare?
well, our expenditures for the fleet division are down over, 10%. And if you want, we can actually take a look, and this is kind of one of the powerful tools that is really fun for financial people and anybody else who might be interested. So we're going to take advantage of what we have available to us. So right now I'm reporting based on the total by a fund, but I have the ability to switch over to our filters here and have it, instead of breaking down by fund, I can switch it to break down by revenue type, so that we can start to look at what's making this up. Now, I happen to know that charges for services, if we clicked into it, it'll drill down further, and those are basically invoices for vehicle maintenance and repairs that get invoiced back out to the individual departments. But fuel charges is found under our miscellaneous revenue, and we can go in and look at those sales. And then this is where you can see the different types. So we do classify them so that you can see the city sale versus the public sales. And on the city sale side, then we have unleaded diesel and natural gas CNG. And then the public sale, we have the CNG. And so the reason that you can't see this data beyond basically 2016 is we accounted for it differently. We didn't break it out this way. And so we've done that. It's been really helpful to us. And let's see, I don't know if I like that one so much, but anyway. And then it just allows you to look at compared to last year. So if I was looking at only the unleaded fuel, we're basically down 19% over last year, same time period. So looking July through December in terms of revenue collections. On unleaded, it's down 19%. And again, we're talking on the revenue side. Diesel is down 10%. Diesel's actually up 10%. The CNG city sales are down 7%, and the CNG public is down 33%. Now again, what I'm not looking at is I'm not actually looking at consumption, so all I'm looking at is dollars. We do adjust our rates based on the cost of actual purchase prices for those, and I haven't done any analysis to kind of provide you with that data today in terms of the value, the dollar per gallon versus actual consumption sales. But this is where you could look at it, and you could start to break that down, and then the same information is available on the expenditure side of things, where you would be able to look within the fleet fund at the purchases that we're buying related to fuel, and we'd be looking for corresponding. And so, anyway, it's cut off just a tiny bit, but you can tell it's unleaded diesel and CNG there, where you can look at our prices and where we would expect it to be compared to budget. You can see that we're quite a bit lower than where we would expect year to date, and quite a bit lower than where we were even last year. So. Unless you have any other questions, we'll jump over and to just the special revenue fund. And our special revenue fund is where we're accounting for our RAP tax, and then we also have a Washington City Foundation that functions as a 501c3. There's really not much to account for at this point yet in the foundation, which is why it's hardly visible in the charts and the graphs. But so our RAP tax fund is, at this point, this is just showing you what we have collected revenue-wise in RAP tax. Now, again, prorated budget, RAP tax also, it's a tax that's collected by the county and then distributed outward, so it also reports 2 months in the arrears, just like the other taxes that we receive. And then on our RAP tax fund expenditures, what we did this year for budgeting is we basically just budgeted to spend whatever we had collected, and then you as the council receive applications twice a year to review those and consider requests for that funding. So on our capital project funds, our revenue, we are above our year-to-date budget, about 9%. Most of that is a direct result of, we did a capital lease purchase for our fire engine this year. And so for governmental accounting, you actually report all of those bond or lease proceeds as revenue. And so that's why in this yellow one, which is our public safety category, you see it really big, and it's because we brought in about $600,000 in funding to purchase our new fire engine.
Where, Kimberly, did that $600,000 come from?
We did a lease purchase. The funding source was through Zions Bank.
Okay, and how much is that a year?
So I think it's around 80. I just looked at that debt service a little earlier today. It's in the $80,000 range.
And
off
where
the
did
top of my
that come
head.
from?
Where it's impact fee eligible. In terms of expense-wise,
Okay.
like how are we making the payments?
Yeah.
It's impact fee eligible. It's a 7-year lease purchase, so right now we have it financed out over 7 years. We also have some, right now in terms of our projections for where impact fees, we are anticipating that, with our initial projections that we will run a little bit short with those impact fee collections between now and then, because we also use those for funding on the police station. Project is also partially impact fee eligible, so those funds go to pay that debt service as well. But we do have additional reserves that are available to us in this capital project fund. We paid off this quarter, which I think I noted it
You did
in the
note that
report,
you-
but I didn't mention
yeah.
it before. But we did pay off our 2001 sales tax bond in November, and that was the bond that we took out when we constructed the 2 existing fire stations. So the Buena Vista Fire Station as well as the fire station out at Washington Fields. Those 2 have been paid off, and we had about $80,000 in reserves that were left over that came back into this fund that will be held to offset any anticipated shortfalls through the life of this lease purchase on the fire engine. So that we had made sure we had the revenue resources available, but we wouldn't release. That's unrestricted funds that could be used towards other capital projects within, the fire division, but we won't release those funds because basically we've kind of committed them right now to make sure we can meet all of our debt service payments. So.
Okay.
And then same thing on the expenditure side of our capital projects. The big driving factor behind there is our impact fee transfers. So we do collect all of our impact fee revenues in capital projects. They're used for projects. If we have debt that's impact fee eligible, then that revenue has to get transferred out to the debt service fund where the debt is held. So for the Parks Department, they have about just under $1 million a year in debt service that's all impact fee eligible. And basically through December, the bulk of that is being reported. And so as you can see, the leisure service, this darker blue one, if we were just to click on that and look at it only, you can just see that it's, in terms of where we would expect if it was a year-to-date plane, we're a lot higher, and that is, again, because of just the timing of when debt service payments come in, and you can see those funds being transferred out to cover that. I can make it a little clearer for you. Let's see if I switch that over.
While you're looking at that, does this update in real time, or is this something that you have to actually
So,
go and upload the data?
Right now, we do manually have to upload the data, and right now we only do it once a month when we've closed out the period. We just had some internal workings that we're working on with our finance department where we would like to try and start uploading weekly. All the live data in terms of as of right now is available in our existing ERP system, so our internal accounting system. But the access and the ease of use for here is so much easier. And the other thing, like even for you, when we were talking about this and we're looking at it, everything connects down to the individual transaction level. So below the graph, there's a table that will kind of summarize the information, but there's another tab called transactions, and if you click on it, you can actually see the individual transactions that are making up the balance that's currently being reported. So it's powerful for our citizens if they simply wanted to, if you were looking at everything, it's easy to hunt for information being paid out to vendors and all kinds of stuff like that. But right now, we do only upload it monthly. And so right now, we're just barely closing out January. We're just, because anyway, that's how the reconciliation process takes us about a little over 2 weeks each month to complete that. And so we just in the past have only uploaded once all that reconciliation is complete, because internally we have all the data real time that's already available to us. But we've discussed uploading it maybe weekly. It only takes about 10 minutes for a simple export and an import for that to occur. The bulk, it's really helpful for the expenditure side of things in terms of once accounts payable, every time checks are being issued. But on the revenue side of things, for your enterprise funds, the revenue is reported when you bill, and we only bill out once a month, so you won't see those numbers report until the very end of the month anyway. On the general fund side, again, the bulk of our taxes, they come in as a direct deposit into our Public Treasures Investments Fund, and we only get those statements once a month. And so we've just kind of been trying to juggle and balance. It doesn't take a lot of time, but even then, will people look at it more than they're looking at it now? Is it worth the effort? So that's just kind of an internal thing that we're working on to decide what might be best for everybody. And then the very last one we have is our debt service funds. So this is where we hold all of our outstanding debt that's government related. So this doesn't include any of the enterprise fund debt. Theirs is actually accounted within enterprise funds. So this would be, as you can see, it's the Coral Canyon Special Service District, our municipal building authority, which is where we house the debt related to the community center, the Sullivan Park, and the police station. Sorry, I had to think for a second there. And then the one that's just generic debt service fund, that's where our sales tax revenue, our sales tax bonds are, and those types of things. So they have really lumpy revenue and expenditures because it's basically transfers. Revenue is coming in from transfers, and it comes in terms of correlation for debt service payments that are going out. There's not much more to account than that in these two funds. So that's basically it. That's what I set aside to kind of highlight for you guys regarding where we are. I do anticipate coming to you guys in March with a mid-year budget opening. It's right now, depending on how the agenda looks, we're going to try and bring that to March 22nd council meeting. So
I just had more of a general question.
Uh-huh.
You're the administrator. Do you see anything that's concerning or worrisome in any of these facts and figures?
I don't see anything concerning or worrisome in regards to those. I do anticipate that we will have some recommendations as part of our budget opening that will come before you in March, but I'm still in the process of analyzing that. But we do have some accounts that the revenue is underproducing, and we have other areas where the revenue is overproducing. So basically neutrals, it's neutral, but it would just be different categories that we're going to report those to. And we'll just have a little bit better picture of where we think that we might be at the end of the year. And we try to make sure, one of the other things is with this refunding that we did, part of the budget opening will be to actually create a budget that accounts for the debt service payments from paying off the old debt. So at the beginning of the budget year, we didn't know we were going to refund. The market was right. We did some refundings. Those resolutions came before the council. So you authorize those, but we need to account for them now in the actual budget. And we try to make sure that we're kind of doing that as things going along so that everything is being authorized by you. We don't spend money unless it's been appropriated by the council. And so that's why, there's a couple of reasons why we have mid-year budget openings or any other time, is if we're either under-reporting or over-reporting, we want to make those adjustments for towards the end of the year, or if something came up and we had an opportunity for a purchase we hadn't initially looked at, we want to take advantage of maybe financing opportunities that are available.
We've expressed some interest in reserve. I don't see that as a category, but
So, you know, reserves, they don't show up because what we're looking at is budget to actual, and I probably have, so in our initial budget, I can't remember off the top of my head if we actually anticipated within the general fund that we would be putting funds towards reserves. We might have, and I can tell you actually really quickly. We'll look and see if I have that turned on. But basically, those are budgetary items, but you wouldn't see them show up throughout the year in terms of where you anticipate, because it's not an actual transaction that's happening.
maybe in March, though, maybe you could address it.
Yes, so in March,
Specifically,
yes, so
that'd
in
be
March
great.
specifically, in the budget opening, we will address that in terms of where our revenue collections are coming in line with expenditures and what we think we may have for reserves by the end of the year.
Thank you.
Yep, that's correct. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kimberly? Thank you for always keeping us on task.
You're welcome. And
Appreciate
as
it.
always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. We're available anytime to address that. And then monthly financial information is also available to you in just our Google Docs, and I usually send out an email once that becomes available. So
Thanks, Kimberly. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to item 7, final plat, consideration to approve the final plat for the town center at Coral Canyon, located approximately Coral Canyon Boulevard, Canyon Greens Drive, applicant Jack Fisher Homes.
Sorry about that, Mayor. I think I just found the cure for my insomnia. I'm going to borrow Kimberly's presentation. I'm not offending to her. It's just when you start talking all that,
It's soothing, isn't it?
it is.
very
It's like
soothing.
watching water flow. It's just so. She was gone, I hope. But as stated, this is a request for approval of the final plat for the town center at Coral Ridge. This particular subdivision is proposing 45 lots, and the area of coverage is 5.61 acres. The zoning at this specific location is planned community development. It's known as the Coral Canyon PCD. The preliminary plat for this subdivision was approved back on July 13th of 2016. Staff's reviewed the requested proposal, and the proposed final plat does indeed conform to the approved preliminary plat. The Planning Commission reviewed the request last week at their February 15th, 2017 meeting. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the final plat for the town center at Coral Canyon subdivision to the City Council, and that's based on the findings subject to the conditions in your report, and they're the standard 5 conditions that we have with every final plat. And I'll be more than glad to answer any questions that you might have on this final plat.
Mr. Ellerman, this may be just a housekeeping issue, but you mentioned on condition number 3, talking about the control monuments being in place. It's not that you know that these are not in place. It's just that before recordation, we'd make sure that those are attested that they're in and in their proper location. Is that right?
That's what that note's for, is let them know that's got to be taking place before it can be recorded, so.
Do they still use witness posts at all for identification?
I don't know.
That would probably save some from being taken out inadvertently.
Yeah, well, I know that sometimes it's hard to find. There's certain, section pins. The big ones are getting harder and harder to find, but there's the real good surveyors, Mr. Bundy, one of our past council, he knows where all the special ones are, and they use those quite frequently, but after that, I'm not sure, but that's one of our
Pretty commonly
conditions.
anymore, they use the
but-
brass monuments that have those
Yep.
ordinance stamped into them and are in
The
place.
serial number and the information.
Yep.
Any questions for Drew or the applicant? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'd make a motion that we would approve the final plat for the town center at Coral Canyon, located at crossroads of Coral Canyon Boulevard and Canyon Greens Drive, with the findings and conditions as noted.
A motion, do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Thank you. Motion and a second.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Bellis tonight.
Nice and I.
Turek, aye.
Thank you, that's approved. Item B, consideration to approve the final plat for the terraces at Green Spring, Phase 3, located approximately Park Grove and Concord Parkway. Applicant Brennan Holdings, number 100 LLC. Jim Raines.
Thank you, Mayor. As stated, a request for the approval of the final plat, the terraces at Green Spring Phase 3. This particular portion of the subdivision is proposing 23 lots, and the area of coverage for Phase 3 is 8.68 acres. The zoning at this location is the single-family residential 8,000 square foot, or the R18 zoning designation. The preliminary plat on this project was approved back on August 27th of 2014. Now, that sounds like it's a while back, but there's been subsequent phases that have been approved, basically number 1 and 2, that have come in prior to that. I'm always make note of that, and just for information, that once a preliminary plat's approved, it has 12 months to get recorded, but they can do it in any phase. If any phase is recorded, then it takes off that time limit for the remaining time. Staff's reviewed the requested proposal and finds the proposed final plat indeed conforms to the approved preliminary plat. The Planning Commission reviewed the request again last week at their February 15th, 2017 meeting. The Planning Commission, by a vote of 4-1, recommended approval of the final plat for the terraces at Green Spring Phase 3 subdivision to the City Council, and once again, based on the findings, subject to the conditions, and they again are the standard 5 conditions on that. And I'll be glad to answer any questions the council might have.
I think that this is my ignorance of where to go to find the minutes that might have occurred in the Planning Commission relative to this. Are they posted for us?
They're quite not yet, because again, it's barely the week before, and so to get them, because right after that meeting's on Wednesday, to get minutes out in your packet, and they're not approved at that point anyway. They're usually on the final plats, we don't have them ready for the final week, the week following that, unless there's a big issue. If there's a denial, then I'll rush Kathy and have her drop everything else to get the minutes there.
When I saw the 4-1 vote, I was curious about what was the discussion that went on, and I couldn't access that, and yet I'm being asked to
Well,
rule on it.
Well, I can basically tell you what happened. It was Mr. Hardman, Commissioner Hardman, wasn't in favor of any of the development up there and was against he just said, because of my feelings towards that, I didn't want any of it to happen. I'm going to vote nay on it. And that's in a nutshell what took place.
That went on.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just, and you know me well, and that was basically, he just said, I didn't like any of this development back, before I
understand.
got on, and so I'm not in favor of it, so I'm just going to stay with how I felt all along, even as a citizen, and vote nay.
The larger issue then is for us to sometimes act on these where we can have attached to our agenda a copy of minutes that are relevant to things that we.
And generally, you will see minutes on
Work on.
every other item. It's just the ones sometimes that happened the prior
The
week.
time of week is too short.
And usually, the only things that come to you in a week overlay is a final plat. And if a final plat, just by state law, conforms to the approved preliminary plat, we're somewhat almost bound to approve a final plat. You'd have to have something that would pop up that would really be something very detrimental to be able to not approve a final plat after the preliminary plat's been approved. That's where the vesting comes in. They get their right to move, and as long as they build it and everything is in accordance with that approved preliminary plat, we're kind of, I can't say we're bound, but we're almost, I would say, bound to approve a preliminary plat once the vesting's taken place.
Thanks, Drew.
So,
Any other questions or comments for Drew? If not, again, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve the final plat for the terraces at Green Springs Phase 3.
I'll second. second that.
I have a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Nice and I.
Bellis and I.
Granger, aye.
Ivy, aye.
All right, that is approved, thank you. Item 8, preliminary plat, consideration to approve the preliminary plat, oh, we're not
Did
doing
away
that one,
with
sorry.
Yep.
Item 9, plat amendments. Item 8, consideration to approve a preliminary plat amendment for the views at Coral Canyon Development Area 4.2, located approximately 300 North Rock Creek Drive, applicant Jack Fisher Homes.
Thank you, Mayor. There's kind of two items happening in this one. The original name for the preliminary plat you can see on your exhibit there was the Coral Canyon Development Area 4.2 subdivision. I think they probably thought about that a little bit and wanted to make it a little more appealing, so they're asking that the name be changed to the Views at Coral Canyon. That's part of this amendment process. And the other portion is that blue shaded area you see, which is the amenity for this particular area that actually was part of the overall PCD. It was down in this area where these two lots and some of this pipe work that's going through is where it originally was. They've since thought about it, and after working on their construction drawings, felt it would be better to move it to this particular location, which staff's fine with, directly to the south across the street there. If you've been up in this area, there's a small park there already that's part of phase 1 of this area, and so it'll kind of enhance the whole area, make it feel like it's a bigger amenity. And so staff didn't have any issues, and this will probably work out better because of easements, et cetera, that are running this particular area you see running at an angle. Is some major pipe work that's running through there that will be cutting through their development actually as it heads to the, get my bearings right, to the south. And so that's the gist behind this, is to change the name and then to move this amenity area in the shaded blue over to this particular location.
So, Mr. Ellman, the enhancement of the aesthetics is just the location and the name,
Yes.
just those
And
two
that's
changes.
the basic, everything else is pretty much where it was before. They just kind of move these around. It's the same number of lots, et cetera, same area. For the most part, it may have changed slightly, but not too much on that in the square footage, but not enough to warrant anything. So staff reviewed the proposed amended preliminary plat, finds it conforms to the PCD zoning that is part of the Coral Canyon Planned Community Development, and the subdivision is also in compliance to the subdivision ordinance of the city. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at their February 15th, 2017 meeting. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the amended preliminary plat for the Views at Coral Canyon subdivision to the City Council, and it's based upon the findings and subject to the original conditions, and those are the 11 are standard, so there wasn't anything extra that was added upon this either by staff under the condition, just our standard 11 for preliminary plats. And I'll be glad to answer any questions the council might have on the proposed amendment.
Any questions? Comments? Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval of the Coral Canyon preliminary plat amendment for the views at Coral Canyon.
I'll
Thank you.
second it.
I have a motion and a second.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Bellis and I.
Nice and I.
Turek, aye.
All right, thank you. Item B, consideration to approve a final plat amendment for the Canyon Greens Commercial Center, Phase B, Third Amendment, for the purpose of removing Parcel 6 from the Canyon Greens Commercial Center, Phase 2, amended recorded plat, along with a portion of the Park Center Drive, located approximately 2251 North Coral Canyon Boulevard, applicant Jack Fisher Homes.
Thank you, Mayor, and I do apologize. We probably should have ran this particular plat before we did the final plat on the Coral Canyon, the town center. This is a portion thereof. This is why this is being amended, to pull this particular area dark out of this particular subdivision, attach it to the town center one. We're fine. It's not going to make any problems, but that's kind of why this is taking place, is that parcel 6 was part of that, the town center one that you approved just a few items ago. But the applicant is indeed requesting amended to the final plat of the Canyon Greens Commercial Center Phase B, Third Amendment. And again, this is to remove that lot number 6 from the plat And staff reviewed the proposed amended final plat and finds it conforms to the zoning at this particular location and the subdivision ordinance of the city. Staff's recommending that the amendment be recommended for approval. Planning Commission reviewed it at their February 15th meeting last week. They unanimously recommended approval of the amended final plat for the Canyon Greens Commercial Center Phase B, Third Amendment subdivision to the City Council. It's based on the findings and the conditions that are attached to your report. I'm glad to answer any questions you might have on this one.
Any questions for Drew or the applicant? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve the final plan amendment for the Canyon Greens Commercial Center Phase B, Third Amendment, for the purpose of removing parcel 6 from the Canyon Greens Commercial Center Phase Second Amended Recorded Plat, along with a portion of the Park Center Drive.
I second that motion.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Nice and I.
Bellis, aye.
Granger, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Thank you. That is approved. Item C, consideration to approve a final plat amendment for the estates at Green Spring plat amendment for the purpose of eliminating lot 324 by dividing it between lots 323 and 325, located approximately 1800 north, 1400 west. Applicant Brennan Holdings, number 100 LLC.
Thank you, Mayor. The applicant, of course, is requesting, as stated, for the amendment to the estates at Green Springs as so indicated by the mayor to just basically eliminate. You can see these, it jumps from lot 323 to 325. They've just taken that and given a little bit of to one and a little bit more to the other. There was these two owners that purchased these two lots, wanted them to be bigger. And this is a process that happens actually quite often, that will come back and eliminate lots out of a subdivision because somebody wants a bigger particular piece, and the only way to really do that through county recordings, et cetera, is to amend the plat. And so that's simply what's here before you. The Planning Commission reviewed the request at their February 15th meeting. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the amended final plat for the estates at Green Springs subdivision to the City Council, and that's based on the findings and subject to the conditions, and they'll remain actually there was an extra condition, I'm glad I peeked. Condition number 6 is that the utilities that were originally stubbed to lot 324 will need to be abandoned at their respective mains prior to the recording. Just to explain that, when a subdivision's built, they'll put out stubs to lots. And we have found over time that if we just put a cap on those right below the sidewalk or on the property line, and just think, well, they're buried, nothing will happen to them. Well, one thing is that the earth continues to move around them, and if they're not tied to anything, they sometimes will tend to break and break down. The other issue that we have probably more than not is that someone will be going through with the backhoe doing some work on either landscaping or whatever it may be, and they'll be digging along, and sometimes they may not even just grab that, but they accidentally just nudge it even. It'll put a crack in it, and then we have this constant leak. And or if it's a sewer line, dirt can get in there and continue just to keep filling the system. So Public Works has found that when we eliminate loss, we want to go all the way back to the source. In other words, the trunk they came from, and cap it at that point. And so that's what we require anytime we eliminate a lot, is to go back, have them dig in.
Up there yet?
The asphalt is in. So hopefully we'll see what happens. Hopefully they won't have to if it's close enough, but generally it's on one side of the street or the other. So it's just gonna, these are the ones why it's hard, but it is the best thing to do, is to go down and cap it at the source. And so that is one of the conditions on this proposal.
Mr. Ellerman, you've taken care of the utilities. How about any easements that would maybe run between these lots? Have they been considered?
When the plat's amended, this over, what it happens is they get rid of the old one. I mean, they may keep it as reference, but this is what's on record. So the easements are whatever the amended plat is.
Okay, thank you.
And so, yeah, what's shown is what the new standing is in place. It's a very good question, though, because that's one of the issues we have sometimes, is easements that weren't removed.
Any questions for Drew or the applicant? Not all. Again, entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll go ahead and motion that we approve the final plat amendment for the Estates at Green Springs plat amendment for the purpose of eliminating Lot 324 by dividing it between lots 323 and 325.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Mayor.
Thank you.
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Dellison, aye.
Nice and I.
Turek, aye.
All right, thank you. That is approved. Item 10, public hearing. A public hearing for consideration to approve the Washington City wastewater capital facilities master plan, which includes an impact fee facility plan, impact fee study, and user fee study. Applicant Mike Shaw, Public Works Director. All around good guy.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I was going to try to pull this up on the TV, but I don't have it. I'll be very brief, Mayor. This was presented to you last night in the work meeting. Approximately a year ago, we started the process of updating our wastewater master plan. It's been a very time-consuming project because with this master plan, we've actually developed a model of our wastewater system, which is going to be very helpful for planning for future, finding deficiencies in the system. We also looked at the future projects that were coming up. We looked at populations, land uses, the basins that flow into the collection system, and build-out potentials and the demand calculations. We did the build-out analysis, a 10-year recommendation, and a build-out recommendations. Then along with that, the calculation of the impact fee and the user fee rates. Now, from last night, after last night's meeting, we actually found an issue with the calculations on the impact fee. So we'd like to actually change that. That's why I'd like to have brought that up. But if you would go, if you have your manual, you actually on page 26, it has the impact fee calculations, and it takes all of the projects that are planned in the plan, and basically takes the total dollar amount and divides it by the number of new connections. This calls out the new connections. It needs to be actually new ERUs. So the good news is that it actually reduced the fee. In the plan, we showed 4,822 new connections, and it should read 5,275 new ERUs, which would take the impact fee down to $980.66. And last night, we showed that it was $1,072 or $1,072.79. The existing fee is $1,159, but with this new proposal, that reduces the impact fee by $178.34. So we are on the good side, I guess, by reducing the fee a little bit more.
I would like reductions.
Also in this, we looked at, we have areas in the city where we have lift stations, and we looked at the cost on those lift stations. We actually went back and recalculated after we didn't calculate in the new power rate increase, but we recalculated that. That would make a difference of 3 cents. So we didn't even look at that. We just left it how it was. So the rate on the lift stations would now go to, let's see, currently we're at $6.27 on the lift stations, and we reduced that to $5.03, which is $1.24 per month reduction in that rate. We looked at the sewer collections fee. Currently, we're at $12.65 on that collection fee, and we're going to be also looking at a reduction on that down to $10.22, so a reduction on the monthly rate of $2.43 to the user. So with this study, we've actually reduced the impact fee and the user fees. So with that, any questions?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
We're saving money.
This is probably just for me, since it is a public hearing, have we hosted this out online or something like that, so for people to read and be able to
Yes,
digest it?
it's been out for public comment. We post it here at the city office, we post it at the library.
Okay.
Mr. Shaw, is there any other lift stations on the agenda other than the one in Warner Valley that we discussed?
Warner Valley, would be a future lift station. So current lift stations, we have a Coral Canyon lift station, another one with Coral Canyon that's at the top of the ridge, the Highland lift station, Sienna Hills lift station, and then a small one for Ridge Point development. So those are current lift stations. And then we have some future planned lift stations in the master plan. And I believe there's one off of Washington Dam Road, and long future is the Warner Valley area.
Any questions for Mike?
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your work on it. This is a public hearing, so any of you out there that might have an interest in wastewater, interest how your stuff flushes out, any questions, you're welcome to come up and address those. Hey, we reduced it for you. That's not a bad deal. If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, I have a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Nice night.
Ellison, aye.
Granger, aye.
IVI.
So then we'll make the final approval in 2 weeks, is that correct?
Yeah, 2 weeks they'll be back and we'll have the resolutions for the fee.
Okay, thank you. Thanks again, Mike. Item 11, ordinances. Consideration to approve an ordinance granting zone change request Z-17-02 to change the zoning designation from open space to residential family 10,000 square foot lots R-1-10, located approximately 1300 east, 1800 south. Applicant Western States Ventures, SG LLC, Walter Plum.
Thank you, Mayor. We had the public hearing on this last week, so I'll just briefly try to highlight. This is a request to change from the open space as stated to single-family 10,000 square foot R110 zoning designation. The general planned use at this area was recently amended to the low-density residential designation. That carries a 3 to 4 dwelling unit per acre density ratio. Surrounding zoning is I1, which is light industrial, residential, agricultural, 1 acre, and single-family residential 8,000 square foot lots to the north, R110 and open space to the west, the R112 and open space to the south and east. Again, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of Z-17-02 for the zone change from open space to the proposed R110 zoning designation. And you've had our 2-week holding time, and just if there's any questions that I can answer for you or entertain.
As far as the roads, do you think they'll be adequate in the future?
I do. Right now, you know, we have at least 2 of them that are stubbed in to just this particular blue area, a possibility of a third coming from this particular area down here in this industrial. It's actually 1300 east. We hope to at some point also punch in up at that particular area. So that'll give 3 just to that particular area, and then down south, which is the next one. I won't touch that till we get to maybe that item, but for the blue area, there's 2 right now, possibly 3, and another 4th one in this area down here on this low density. When that gets developed out, we're hoping to maybe have one there. So
It's not really relevant to the parcel, but it is relevant to that piece for the school that I hope we will continue to work with the, make sure we have enough entrances and exits to make that school functional rather than just one.
yeah, it probably road-wise it probably won't happen, but maybe accesses through would be another route. But that's again totally in their hands, unfortunately not ours, of what their safety And you've been with the school district, sometimes those override other things, so,
Yeah,
but
I
we'll
think
see what they do.
we need to get the legislature to help us override so that we're making good sense when we
No,
create safety issues that we don't have control over.
no.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments for Drew on this one? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve the ordinance granting zone change request Z-17-02 to change the current designation from open space to residential 10,000 square foot lots R110.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second.
Turek, aye?
Nice and I.
Belliston, aye.
Granger, aye.
IVI.
Thank you. Item B, consideration to approve an ordinance granting zone change Z-1705 to change the zoning designation from open space to residential family 12,000 square foot lots, R-112, located approximately 1300 east, 1800 south. Same applicant.
And nearly same location, if I may add. This is the green area slash to the south of the one we just did. Again, this is a proposal to go from open space to R112, and they went to the R112 to be more conducive to the properties that abut it here on the west, Silver Falls and High Chaparral. And so that's the reason why they jumped to that particular one, just to be, again, more closely related to those two subdivisions. Again, this is a recently amended general plan to the low-density residential, carrying again the 3 to 4 dwelling units per acre. The surrounding zoning to this particular parcel is open space, and as just approved, R110 to the north, open space to the south and east, and R112 to the west. The Planning Commission, again, unanimously recommended approval of Z-1705 for the zone change from open space to the proposed single-family residential 12,000 square foot or R112 zoning designation to the City Council.
On the Heights of Washington bench right there, there was some question on whether or not there was gonna be access through it. Was there ever a preliminary plat done on that project?
On this one,
Like, the engineer's back there nodding his head up. and
there
down.
was, but it may not ever,
Did it expire, or?
no, it doesn't expire because it's a continuation of the phase of this, so it can stay in there, but I also heard they ran into some problems. Well, there's some soil issues right in that area. The worst soil
Yeah,
issues are
doubt-
there,
No
but
doubt about that. I'm just wondering if there's ever a preliminary plat, because we're not showing how that relate, you know, where.
right, there
it
was, and there
stubs
was
in.
no stub to my recollection on that preliminary plat, but doesn't mean one can't come back in and maybe be worked in at a future time unless this particular area develops a lot faster than that, which it most likely will, I'm thinking. But that has been talked about with them, and we've tried to get a hold of the owners of that particular piece as well.
I asked partly for my own curiosity, but also partly because access was brought up so much in the public hearings on getting in and out of there. So, you know, at one point, you know, there was some concern there was only 2 or 3 accesses. In reality, we've got, you know, 5 or 6 accesses into the overall parcel with both pieces, so.
Yeah, there's great possibilities for more, so. But yeah, I know Lester's been working with that with the engineers, et cetera, trying to find another one in there somehow.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on that piece?
You had, I got one to talk about.
Yeah, Brant? Is Brant here? Brant had a couple of questions. I think I chased him out last time. Maybe I really didn't chase you out,
It's
but
just a misunderstanding, that's all. The only questions I have, I'm not for or against, you know, the city's gonna grow, that's a great thing. We're here to grow. We're hoping to build a home within the year. next to the home that we live in currently. And that lot backs a pretty big valley where that water all collects and then it drains out. Where it drains, I'm not sure, but there's a big pipe that comes up there. We would like to build a basement on that, build our home with a basement. And so my concern is where that water's going to go, how that's going to take place.
At this point, when it's just the overlay, we don't get to
Right.
see the plat and how they're gonna lay it out and all of that. The developer and the engineer here in the back over there, I'm sure they could probably let you know and address those concerns, because there will be a requirement that, you know, they can't be putting nuisance water onto your property. You know, they've got to handle any of the runoff that they create. So.
So that was,
So you should be protected.
that's the
Probably more
only,
so than
that's
you
my
are
only
now.
question and comment, so.
Okay,
Well, where are you? I'd stay close to that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect,
Stay
thank you.
Close to it.
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, no other comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'd make a motion to approve Z-17-05, open space to R112 zoning designation for a future development.
I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second?
Ivy, aye.
Granger, aye.
Ellis and I.
Nice and aye.
Turek, aye.
Thank you. Item C, consideration to approve an ordinance granting zone change request Z-1703 to change the zoning designation from multifamily residential R3 to multifamily residential R3 with a residential resort with residential rental short-term overlay zone located approximately 450 North, 1200 East. Applicant Vita Sol Communities, Anthony Bocchino.
That's a tough name, Mayor. You handled it well. As stated, this was the overlay residential rental short-term request at this particular location. Again, they're proposing this change for future development that could and would allow for short-term rentals. Vacation rentals is the more common term at the particular location. Planning Commission reviewed the request at their January 18th, 2017 meeting. They unanimously recommended approval of Z-17-03 for the overlay zone request, adding the residential rentals short-term overlay zone to the current existing multifamily residential R3 zoning designation. And that was to the City Council and based on the findings, as you see in your report. So I don't know if you've had any questions you want to bring up since the 2 weeks on this particular project. I'll be glad to answer if I can.
Probably gonna be a little bit of discussion on these, but, you know, I got probably half a dozen questions real quick, if we kind of break through some of them. Before I get into that, I mean, you know, as far as projects go for overnight rental, location and surroundings, to the east of this project, we got a buffer zone in the parkway. To the west of the project, we got the turf farm. To the north of the project, we've got the applicant himself. And to the south of the project, we have had heard very little opposition to it. So, I mean, it's pretty well buffered around, and location-wise, it works well for, you know, access in and out, exit 13 and whatnot. I guess some of the questions that I've got, you know, are probably more within Washington City and how we handle things and how we keep after stuff. Right now, I guess I'm a little unsure with, you know, business licensing and collections and all of that, because, you know, how we deal with the overnight rentals and how we deal with the different, you know, hotel-related fees and funding. I guess I don't understand that we're collecting that at this point, right?
Well, we
So
have
some are,
we have a dozen, I think, business licenses scattered. Most of them are in Coral Ridge because that's where they are. I think there might be one or two in the casitas at Sienna Hills. So we do have probably a dozen plus.
But there's a lot out there that are not being.
Well, we have hundreds of illegal ones going, and they're definitely not going to be coming in for a business license just because of the nature of what they're doing. But yeah, we do need to make a sweep through Coral Ridge. I know their homeowners association president has been on folks to get in. He's one who owns one. He's one that is licensed. He has told his people to get into the city. We just need to get that list and probably be a little bit more
Even if-
aggressive in getting those.
Even if they come in and get the business license, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily taking care of the sales taxes and things like that.
Well, you'd be
Go through the
surprised.
state.
I'll let Tara kind of jump into that there.
When they give a business license, we actually make them provide their transient sales tax number on the license itself.
Okay.
So once we can actually get them all out, which we have gotten a list, a mailing list of labels and a draft letter ready, they will be required to provide that. However, it is very difficult to get people to respond, so I can send out 200 letters and I'll probably get 20 responses that are actually not before turning over to code compliance. So we are working on it. It's just gonna take a little bit of time.
I think, Drew, as part of this discussion, I know that those that are in the, I want to call them the professionals, the
Property management.
property management groups do collect those that are involved with it. So the question I would have is, can we condition part of this is that they do have a local property management group that does manage those?
That's part of their zoning. They actually have to. They have to have one of those.
So then that should cover your questioning there, if we have a local
One of
professional.
those, one of those local professionals told me that, hey, you know, you guys have this in your ordinance, but you're not collecting it. You know, and so if that's one of the people in the town that says either they're not being proactive about paying taxes, which I don't know that many people are proactive about volunteering taxes, or we're not, you know, enforcing it
Usually the
and whatnot.
TRTs and whatnot are actually collected through the county, they're not collected through the city. And so that's more of a county accounting issue, because the county's the one that does the RAP taxes, the TRT taxes, and that whatnot. So that really doesn't even come into our, so my understanding is from at least the discussion I've had with the one professional group, was that they do collect those and they do submit those to the county.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't know.
Now, the sad part we found out over time, we thought we were missing out on lots of good revenue. Come to find out that, and St. George was just as baffled here recently to find out that that transient sales tax, you know, that's hotels and motels collect, and this falls in that category. It's dispersed to the county, but very small portions go to each city.
Yeah, very,
And
very small.
St. George is paying a bigger price for that, I think, with the number of motels and hotels they have. I think they were really shocked to find out how little they actually get out of the transient tax, you know, that's collected by the state, but not dispersed out to the cities where that is actually taking place. It's because of those things. And so this, I think we might make more money getting our $50 a year on the business license on some of them than we might get through the transient tax. And I'm being a little sarcastic and facetious, but I don't know, because we don't have any history yet, but it wouldn't surprise me.
So,
We can also work with our city treasurer. He's the one that goes over sales tax, so, and he worked for the state tax commission as well at one point. So we might be able to be a little more aggressive once we can get everyone notified.
well, and I think that that's part of the last few overnight rental projects that have come through. We've required that they stick to one,
Property
one
management.
overall rental management group, so that we don't have kind of a free-for-all, and there's no, everybody's doing their own thing, and I mean, it just creates issues.
So what money do we actually get? Business license?
Well, we get the fee right off the top, the $50 a year without any question.
That's about all you get out of it.
But if you have, you know, 500 of those out times $50, that's a little bit of chunk of money, but, we're gonna get a little bit of that transient sales tax. We do. I'm not saying we get none, but
Probably doesn't cost the code, cover the cost of code enforcement, though, so.
probably not.
Out of those 200 letters she has to send out.
Right.
So that brings
Well,
me to
you
my
know,
next.
something futuristically,
Oh, I'm
pardon
sorry.
me, is, if you recall last week when we had the discussion with our legislative body discussing overnight rentals, they actually talked about that you could increase the business license fee for those particular units to cover the cost of code enforcement and whatnot. So you may, I mean, if it becomes problematic, you may look at increasing that fee for those because of the increased cost of utilizing it.
Different rates for different types of businesses
Businesses,
in
yeah.
Washington State as well, especially ones that have more policing required, so we can probably bring that back. I mean, I would think a vacation rental is probably gonna require a significantly larger amount of policing for someone who does crafts out of their home. So we can bring that back.
Can we get that on the schedule to look at?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Part- Do you want to, are you going to ask your other 20
I'm gonna
questions,
ask
or
50 questions.
just checking?
Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt your flow.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'll find a
He's in a
spot.
rhythm.
You know, part of my question then is not, is this a good project? It is in a good location, as good perhaps as we're going to have to try it out and see what happens. And I know in the flow of applications, we have at least 2 others that are probably going to be coming at us for short term. And we've just done recently Coral Canyon. And my question is, really, how many is too many? What have we learned from these? Because we've got them coming at us so quickly because you just passed the ordinances that allow this just 2 years ago, I guess. I'm not sure when. And should we put once the ones that have already applied to some degree, should we put a moratorium on it and study it and look at it before we allow more of that to occur? I don't know what it's going to do to our city, what it's going to do to enforcement issues, safety issues, travel issues, collection issues. It just seems like we have a lot going on and we don't know really what the impact is and if this is even a really good idea. I just, well, I think, you know, part of it is to maybe table this until our next meeting and have a discussion on a Tuesday night where we talk more about what we think the outcomes are going to be for some of the decisions that we're making. Really not specific to this project. This is probably as good a project as we can bring. Maybe it's the one we study the most, but there are at least 2 others that deserve our consideration because they've already showed some interest, but maybe we want to table it and maybe we want to put a moratorium on. I just want to throw those concepts out because I have to admit that the number of these coming at me has caused me a lot of less sleep than I would like to have.
And I totally understand and agree with that. I guess my opinion on that would be, if you don't mind, is that I know there's hundreds of illegal ones taking place in our city, exactly where they're all out, but we have been given some rough numbers between probably anywhere between 200 to 500. So I guess my philosophy would be I'd just like to create at least 200 to 500 legal ones. So there is, you know, to match the illegal ones, so we have those folks that are using those a legal place to go at this point. That's my rationale. I hope that kind of makes sense. I'd like to create just as many, if not a little more, legal ones available versus the high number of illegal ones that are taking place right
The
now.
one thing that you, at least I think that we need to look at and consider is this, all these units are not going to be overnight rentals. What it does is allow some that come in there, but I think these types of units lend to themselves to starter homes, family homes for those, and so you're not going to end up with the whole project being overnight rentals. It does give them a segment to another market to go into. That I'm sure there will be some investors that are looking for that type of thing, but how many does remain to be seen. I mean, obviously, my opinion is you're not going to see that whole thing be investors. It just won't happen.
I would totally agree with that. This is just me personally, and I've expressed this before. I like seeing the overlay application come in with a preliminary plat, come in under CUP when we got the site plans, so we know how, okay, fine, we're dealing with overnight rentals and these are the issues that they've brought, at least in our past developments, and here's how we've addressed them. My preference has always been to hold off until that point, not do it on just a blanket, here's a parcel, we don't know what we're doing with it yet.
And I apologize for that. Probably that falls on my shoulders because generally what it is in the overlay zone is that they are to propose that project that way, but all the ones we've had so far either have been R3 zones, so I know we're going to get that. I explained that
Yeah,
we'll get it
and
at the
I
CUP,
understand.
but I should have, and I probably need to be a little bit more making them put that up front. You would have seen it. Normally that is part of the process, and most of them probably are going to, not all of them are going to be in R3.
Well,
but these have been, and that's my bad on that.
I don't know
so.
that it's your bad. I just think that, I also understand from the developer's point of view, he's got to look at it and say, well, if I get the overlay, I'm going to design it different than if I don't get the overlay.
Exactly.
Right? So you
yeah.
want to try and narrow it down so they're not doubling their work in case they submit it and bring it in and, oh, well, we're not going to get it. And so I get that catch-22. we mentioned before, maybe we do the overlay as, it's just part of a PUD, and and we get a certain PUD zone, and that has the overlay with it, if that's what we apply for. And we've talked before on, people coming in for a PUD typically have to have the whole plan to even apply for the zone.
Right.
That's one reason why I like the application totally separate from the zone. They can come in and say, okay, we want to do overnight rentals, this is the zoning we're coming to request. Great, you got it. Now we've got the application that comes through and says, this is how we're addressing it and doing it.
And you will see it at a preliminary plat stage. I even failed to mention that. Not all of them, like some of them may be owned by one person. We just approved by the Planning Commission this. I'm going to give you an example. AJ Construction, Austin. They own this piece, basically kitty corner off the. Let me just go.
The rectangle.
Yeah, right here. It goes all the way over to 1100 East. Zoned R3, but the owner is going to own the whole property. It's going to be all apartments. It got approved for 72 apartment units right there a week ago. Really nice design, good looking buildings, amenities, et cetera. It's going to be a really nice complex right there that, again, approved by the Planning Commission through their CUP process. But it won't be a minor, you won't see a subdivision come in because, again, apartments are owned, you can't sell them out or they become condominiums. But it's going to be one ownership, so you won't see a plat on that. But on a townhome project, that most of these are going to be, because they're made to sell to someone to buy, and then, from up north as a second home, rent out the other 9 months they're not here. You will see those in a preliminary plat, but again, not so much the elevations per se. But if they got to go to their CUP, I could probably make it part of that anyway and bring it in with it, But again, that's down.
Well,
unfortunately, we're caught between this, the chicken and the egg. What do we want to see first? And
Well, that brings it to policy issue for me, was we don't see those CUPs.
correct.
And so I feel like, as a council, I'm somewhat unaware of the magnitude of what's going on relative to high-density housing. And I wonder, as a council, if we ought not to be able to see those CUPs. Because I know in my limited experience that's happened a couple of times where some really big projects have come in and we don't really know about them. At least I feel like we don't know about them. Shouldn't we know about them? If we're trying to look at what's happening to the city and how we keep things in balance, that's information that I feel like I would like to have. If not to rule on, at least to have, and maybe to give a final approval to the work of the Planning Commission, which is what we always do in everything else. So why not in the CUPs?
Well, the council used to look at all CUPs. Well, it was a Planning Commission, and then something happened on Telegraph that the council back years ago wanted to take control of the CUPs again, so it went through both Planning Commission and City Council. And then after a while, the council, not too long ago, I think Councilman Turk, it might be the only one here, that they felt comfortable with the group in the Planning Commission and sent that back for them to be, on certain things. They don't approve a lot of things. Mostly they are a recommendation body, and they like to tell you that, but I don't blame them, but there are a few things that they do vote on outright and approve, and CUPs are one of those. So I guess it's a trust between the Planning Commission and City Council on those.
Not trust. I adore the Planning Commission, actually. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I just think they're just competent and hardworking and really trying to do the right thing for the city. But I'm uninformed about something I think I should be informed about, and I don't know how I'm going to get informed about that if I don't see it or hear it on the agenda.
I think the concern that was brought up, or at least expressed to me, was that it eliminates the appealing body. So
That is one of the drawbacks when the council does CUP approvals, yeah. Because then it has to go to,
puts
it
out.
jumps it to 5th District Court, the
Right.
appellate on that. And that is a rough process for both the applicant and your citizens. That's who the applicants generally are, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are your citizens, and then they have, and then even the council, that's
probably
their
true for
appellant.
everything, isn't it?
What's that?
I mean, why is it any more true for the CUP than it is for a PUD or their appeal process is still, in this case, it's the council, but normally it's outside of either body.
Yeah, I guess the biggest difference, I'll give a little,
Usually isn't. Typically,
it-
it's
yeah.
the legislative, except for those things that are really legislative decisions, just by definition, that's the last
Well, and the other thing, if I may just tag on to that, generally CUPs, and a lot of people don't understand this, but they are permitted uses out, or, they're permitted in that zone, just not 100% outright. They're permitted with conditions that may apply because, and if you talk to the ombudsman's office or the city, the League of Cities and Towns, they try to talk as many cities in as possible to eliminate as many CUPs as you can. In other words, don't have them in your zoning if at all possible, because you're setting yourself up for what could, you could treat one different than the other, and then someone's going to feel like they were unfairly treated. So their whole philosophy is eliminate, if not all, as many as possible, anything in your zoning that requires a CUP.
So,
And so I'm just trying to throw that out as a little help that we're trying, we're not trying to have more CUPs and things, because it does set us up, for a possible train wreck on any given one.
And you talked about perhaps some other PUD zoning
And
possibilities.
I'd rather
that we
probably
could-
see it if this is the issue. And again, we're learning as we're going through this, and we're one of the,
We're all
to be
learning.
honest with you, we're probably one of the most progressive cities when it comes to this vacation rental that I'm aware of, right now with what we're doing. And we're very trying to be out there and find the best way. We're out, and we spent just for some of your history, the newer council members, is that we spent a year and a half, almost 2 years, discussing this with the Planning Commission and the City Council, fine tuning this thing. We did go from this very strict overlay zone, this very strict CUP, and we went through and said, no, we're not going to throw that in there. We're not going to do, but I can promise you on certain nights, and Councilman Turk and I will both attest to that, we started out on one side of the discussion, and within an hour and a half later, we're 180-degree flipped, and then an hour later, it was back to where we started. Because it is such a difficult, thing to really get your hands around, and you want to be this way, but then you also discuss it and think, I get that too, and it's probably one of the hardest discussions we've had in getting an ordinance together, was talking about these vacation rentals. A lot of time went in, and we tried to make it what it is today for lots of reasons.
Well,
So,
I just think, maybe that suggestion that we look at eliminating CUPs and move them into zoning designations for short-term rentals gives us more clarity and gives us maybe a way to pull some of those concerns about preliminary plats and overlays. Maybe it's a logical next step. I don't know that it is, but it certainly merits, I think, some discussion.
it's definitely worth looking at, turn it into a PUD type of a thing.
I don't want to hold up the current applicants. I mean, it's one thing to table for a couple of weeks. It's another thing to, deny it until we get our act together, whatnot. I know there's been some concern expressed on quantity, because, we've got, 3-4 projects that have come up for short-term rental, and they've been given the overlay, and they're not even up and running and functioning. So, there's some concern that, this potentially is, 14 acres times 16, so 250 units, and there's another one right behind it that's 300-something units, and, that's a lot of these coming on real quick, and so there's concern on, what that's gonna mean for our community. Has there been any discussion on, I guess with this, it's not 14 acres, we got 2 parcels, and so, my question is, do we approve one and not the other? Or and that's not, obviously that's not fair to those 2 guys. Do you approve it with, limits on amount, okay, you can have 50% of these rented.
And that kind of defeats all the and I'm not trying to disagree, I'm just throwing the whole discussion came as why we wanted them all in the same development. So you're not saying that, because if I'm the one guy and all of a sudden the guy, it becomes a first come, first serve, and if there's 100 units and I'm the 51st buyer that I wanted to go in, I'm really feeling shortchanged, that, and I'm not saying that's not, it is what it is, but that's the whole reason why we did the overlay zone, because we wanted to push people. That's why our CUP is so tough. People think I'm going to be the first one to get the first CUP in an overnight. And then they go talk to all their neighbors, and we put that clause in there, 75% of everybody within 500 feet. It's dang near impossible. Now, I'm not going to say it never happened, but people have tried and they failed. And we made the CUP that hard because it's amongst people who, we don't want them. where you're already living in a neighborhood. That's why we wanted to make the overlay zone a little bit more appealing for people to go to that, so that the whole development is all the same. We have them all in the same area doing the same thing. And
Well,
Whether
again,
the people buy into that, know what they're buying into.
They're all buying
That's-
into it that
It's not an
way.
existing family that suddenly is impacted. They knew when they bought the home that was going on in the neighborhood, so they bought in knowing that.
that's why we went
Yeah,
with the whole
and,
complex.
you know, to that end, I haven't seen anything come through that would, had even one buyer in it that was given an overlay rental after the fact. You know, once one person's bought it, it's been viewed here as, you're not gonna sell a bill of goods to that guy and change the rules on him unless he's 100%.
Correct.
Or you pretty much
Yep.
got everybody in full support of it. Again, this parcel, there's, you know, this project here, to me, it's, you know, the issues for the overnight rental are mitigated out.
It's the
I've got-
future ones
I've
you're
got more
worried
heartache
about.
with the couple that are coming down the pipeline that give me some concern as well, which is why, we might, you know, I'd be comfortable having a little bit of internal discussion in a workshop or something like that, so that we can at least vet some of it out.
I just think in terms of just the number, percentages, only example we really have that are these 55 and older communities. But the thing about those communities, and as that came about over the last couple of decades, is that one thing, you got the federal government kind of jumped in on some of those things just because of the age issue with it, but they regulate themselves. The cities don't regulate how many, you know, that you have a certain percentage or so many of them are done. I just think, I find that to be almost nightmarish in terms of if we as a city have to regulate, only so many of that unit get to have, that's why I thought we had the overlay to do it, so that anybody can do it who wants to, they all know they can do it. In terms of just monitoring that, in terms of time of your staff, and what you wouldn't be able to be paid for, or the services that have to go into that, I think you raise that level of what you're going to be using your staff for to try to keep that, to try to even keep that number in sync. That's the difficulty of that one. It's almost, I see it almost as being.
Well, I think we have
Thumbs
to,
up
we have to
question.
assume 100%, even though it
Exactly.
may only be 50. I think we
think you
have
do.
to assume 100%. So when we
Yep.
add that many units, we're adding that many short-term rentals as a possibility.
I think that, for one thing, for example, that's how we do impact fees. We have to assume what our zoning is. We assume it's all going to be filled in at, you know, R1, you know, if it's R1 acre lots, we assume that already, and that people are going to be there, and we build to that. And I think we do it for our overlays for vacation rentals. I think we have to almost assume it, at best or worst, if depending on your perspective, it's going to be 100%. I agree.
Our next workshop's on the 7th.
No,
No, I think that's the
14th. It is a 7th, you're right, because, yeah,
So,
we had the 1st.
so do we have much on that?
I have a note on there that says do not add anything. I'm not getting
Same thing as the 21st.
to the 7th. I think we add something. Can we add something there?
I'd just like to say I kind of agree with Drew on it, and I think as far as the illegal activity, it's that's a hard nut to crack because
His is gonna be down on the 21st. We can find it.
It's up to the mayor if he's willing to put it on.
It's late
Although I don't
night,
like that label it being on.
late night, late night.
Well, the 7th
What's
is,
on the
the 7th is actually the first Tuesday.
We go off
But
the
if we go off the Wednesday, so it's
It's
the
the,
second
it's the
Wednesday.
Tuesday before your meeting.
Before the city
Is that
council
how we
meeting,
do
yes.
it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Councilman Nyson, what were you saying?
I just think as far as the illegal activity, we're getting into this area of fundamental property rights. And a lot of these people feel like that they can rent their house, you know, and they should be able to have that fundamental right. And I think sometimes maybe we do go overboard in, you know, in what we demand. And I think we got to kind of look at the whole situation.
And I think you've seen, one thing we have to be aware of is the fact that there's probably, I would say there's a pretty good chance that we're gonna have state legislation coming out that'll probably go into effect when they usually do, like 1st of July or so, or in June, that for those areas that we haven't necessarily addressed, and that is where only part of a house is going to be rented out as vacation rentals, so less than 30 days, there's a good chance the state's gonna come in and they're gonna require those to be allowed. So we have to accept the fact that that might happen also, as council Nyson, so.
Well,
They may
if
also do
if
that
it
for
passes the Senate, it'll probably pass the House. If it passes the Senate, it might be with the exception of HOAs. But, I think we have the balance that we try to find is the balance between I own my home and what's my neighbor going to be like, and I own my home and I can do whatever I want. And we're a community. We're not isolated farmhouses out in rural Utah. We're a community, and we have to balance those private rights with what the demands of a community are. And I don't know if we all can ever totally agree what that balance is. I know there are people who disagree with us, but I think part of our responsibility is to find that balance.
And the part of the state law, if I remember right, is that you can only do that if the state passes theirs, if you live in the home. You have to be
That's
living in
right.
the home to
It's
be
a
able to do
res- it has
that.
to be your
So
home.
we're
It has to
still
be
going to have a lot of number of these that are second homes that are going to still fall within our regulations.
That are still outside of their parameters.
They're still going to be in our parameters because they're not going to be living in that home.
Well, for
And they'll still have to
Council
fall.
For Council Nyson's point, that's, in my discussions with the land policy committee up there also, with the state, who work with all the cities, especially on this vacation rental thing, we're one of the few communities that have really dug in and kind of drilled down on these two different areas that try to balance those. You're a landowner, that's why that's why 250 or so years ago, we moved here so we could own private property. But then you've got to balance off those other rights of other people's rights also to live in a community. We're one of the few communities in the state that have tried to address two things. One is new communities coming in, so the whole subdivision's going to be, the whole subdivision might be able to have vacation rentals, but everybody knows it going into it, buying it. And also try to address the individuals who already own property in the individual houses by having at least a process they can go through to try to be allowed to do that. We're one of the few communities that's done that, and it took us, again, about 1.5 years to come to that conclusion.
When does 253 go before the Senate?
Maybe tomorrow.
We don't know.
Well, the House goes, it
No,
goes before
we
the
don't
House
know.
tomorrow.
House today.
It's still on the list, but it's about 28th on the list for the reading calendar for tomorrow.
Okay.
That'll tip, we still got about 2 weeks to go. That's far enough down, it should go up. It should be voted on, which I think is a pretty good indication that the House is going to approve it, which means then they vote on it. But until it gets voted on, it won't even go over to the Senate to go through their committee for approval, to be put on their first, second, third reading list also.
Okay.
But at the end of the session, it's like all those
Chaos.
formalities kind of just go boom out the window and stuff gets passed out of nowhere, so.
Okay.
Back to the discussion on this particular piece. One of the things that I always look at when we look at approving these or disapproving them is the impact on neighbors and in that exact area here. I would concur with what Councilman Belliston had mentioned about, this is a pretty isolated area, so really the impacts are, the people who impacted the closest are going to be the Pine Valley Townhomes area, the new development here, that was just brought to us, and whatnot, and I haven't heard anything from those folks. The thing I look at is traffic issues. Where's the traffic going to come? It's going to come this way. The buffer from the homes, those that spoke against it were basically all on the east side of the parkway, to where really no traffic is going to impact them. If anything, there may be some noise impacts if depending on the type of activities. Hopefully that doesn't occur. But in all reality, this parcel sets about as good a parcel you can if you're going to look at something like this.
Yeah, again, like I said, this project and these parcels don't really concern me. It's some of the other ones that we've got coming up, so.
Well, we can look at those on an individual basis. Like I say, you have to look at the merits of those projects
Yes.
when they come and what their impacts are in those areas. And if they impact them negatively, then
Judge each one.
And I think the overall impact, that is, we have a citywide impact, what are we doing, as opposed to parcel by parcel.
That's where they pay you all the big bucks.
Mayor, if there's no more discussion, any more discussion?
I just have a question for Mr. Ellerman that was, our discussion went past it, but I'd just like to ask, are we actively pursuing any of the overnight rentals that are not licensed? I mean, has that kind of been our policy, or are we
No, our policy is act upon complaint.
just acting on the
Yeah, and
complaint?
that's given from previous council, that's, until our policy changes, that's how we've acted, is that, or if we're in the line of our duty on other things, if we find out about something and we see it, a real problem miss, then we can, but we're not out driving the streets or knocking doors saying, everything fine in your neighborhood, it's usually by complaint.
But you estimate that there's between 200 and 500?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if that's conservative or liberal on it, but it's,
I think we got that from
but I
some
would,
testimony.
I would say anywhere between 200 and 500, conservatively, yeah.
Thank you.
We have had, took a couple of years, but we got them to stop.
Yeah, we've shut down, I think, at least a dozen that I'm aware of. I don't know of all of them all the time, but I know of it probably going through my head, a couple of them in Coral Canyon that have been closed down, a couple in the fields.
You have one up by your resident councilwoman. She had one up that way.
Yeah, and we had one or two in Green Springs that have been after. So we've taken care of, I think, anywhere between 10 and 12 of them. And only one of them, I think, went to district court. So, and
So
we
if-
still won that one, so.
If we were to pursue that, would we consider maybe monitoring the Airbnb?
That's the best way to do it. And I would
But if they-
recommend.
if-
Trying to make
But the
that
problem
illegal in
is,
this bill.
as part of the state legislation that's coming through.
You won't be able to
specifically
use that.
Is that you can't locate to try to enforce by looking at the Airbnbs, which again, my position has been, that makes no sense whatsoever. If you're gonna put state legislation that addresses whether you can or can't do it and regulates it, but forbids a city from doing the most sensible and
Practical.
economical process in finding out whether somebody's,
Following the state law or not. Yeah.
Well, you have to question the motives of why they would even put that in this bill. I have to say why they even put that in, because then the intent is
But we know what the motive is. We just, yeah.
questionable, very questionable.
that's the nice thing about local government, and that is, we spent a year and a half going over this and elected officials sweating and hearing comments at the meetings, and every time they walked into a grocery store for a year and a half about the local citizens' feelings about it, and how it impacted them and what they thought should be done. And then you drafted legislation to try to address it, and you remove that just one step away to go to the state, and you feel like you've kind of lost that connection of why did it get drafted like this, and at least local legislation, local government, that's why we think local government, regulates and governs best.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. We discussed that. So I put it on for a workshop on the 7th, so we'll have that discussion. Back to the original. Sorry,
I'm
Councilman.
ready to make a motion if you're ready to take one.
Well, I'll consider a motion, absolutely.
Let me preface the motion by saying that, like I said earlier, I agree this project is one that, for the area, location, everything about it is exactly what we've been asking for in the overlay. I also don't want, at this point, to kind of turn the tables on the applicant since they already got it in, and we're wrestling with some of these issues for future projects and not these guys. But just want to tell you that any other projects that get submitted are gonna be, looked at entirely different, and might wanna let those applicants know that. But with respect to, zone change request Z-17-03, I would make a motion that we approve the ordinance granting the request to change the zoning designation from multiple family residential R3 to multiple family residential R3 with a residential rental short-term overlay zone.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Nice and I.
Ellis, aye.
Granger, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Okay, that is approved. Move on to item D, consideration to
I
approve.
would, may I make another motion?
Yes.
Thank you. With the exception of the next one coming up, I would move that we put a moratorium on further approvals until we've had time as the cabinet and staff to clarify some of these deliberations that we're having, determine what zoning we want and what conditions we want.
You can do that?
Can we do that, or we have to put that on as agenda item?
In order to do that, there's a special procedure that we need to go through that allows that to be done, to put moratoriums. It can only be for a specific amount of time, but I can fill any of you individually on what that process is. We've kind of gone through it before. We've only used it a few times over the last 25 years in the cities I've worked in anyway, but you have to have specific reasons for it, which you can consider, but we'd want to do that. We'd want to put that on for an agenda, a future agenda anyway. But there's a process you go through. We specifically can do that. But now that we have it as a zoning, as a land use provision, we'd have to go through that to do that. That's very specific. So I think if the suggestion is, do we want to consider that for our next agenda, for our next city council meeting, which would be, I think we talked about 8th, the 8th, so it's pretty soon. You can discuss amongst each other to put it on for an agenda, and I'll have the stuff ready and get you information for it too.
Okay, so what you're saying is, let's not have a form of a motion, let's just see what you come up with, and then we can decide if we want to vote on it.
Yeah, then we'd have to specifically vote on it, and we'd have to make kind of a presentation to make sure we got the legal items and findings within it in the resolution that we'd approve, which I can show you. That's one process you can go through.
So, well, we're stuck with, I don't know if the council even wants us to go to that trouble.
Well, you guys, you don't have to put that on for the agenda item now. You can talk about that and just direct me to start getting it ready. Easy, especially given the fact that,
So did you make that as a motion, Councilwoman?
It's a motion that we
So,
look
you know-
at what it would take to do that and bring it back to the council.
Right. We'll take that motion off and move forward with,
You can certainly direct Council Starkey to be,
That's what we'll do.
to get some information back to you
that's
on
what we'll
that.
do.
I
We'll
realize the
direct
time
him.
is limited, and it should be limited, but it would push us to decide what we're going to do with zoning and some of these other
Sure,
considerations.
and I can get that
so,
information to you within, I don't know, let's say a day and a half maybe?
Okay.
We'll give you 2.
No, that'd be too late. By Friday morning? 9 a.m.?
Yeah. Okay, item D. So that was approved. Item D, consideration to approve an ordinance for zone change request Z-1704. Change zoning designation from multifamily R3 to multifamily residential R3 with residential rental short-term overlay zone located approximately 500 north, 1100 east. Applicant King J LLC, Dalton Barlow.
Hey, Mayor, if I may, we'll just keep this pretty simple. This is due west,
Can I
pardon the term, but of the last proposal.
Can I ask a quick question? On that, on the prior ones that we've done, we required that they be under a singular management, and if it's possible, I'd like to amend my motion to reflect that.
These are two separate owners.
No, I know, on the last one.
He wants to go back to
No,
the
I
original.
understand.
Add that
On the last
condition.
one, to add that condition. Because yeah, I would like to add that condition. So that
Yeah.
if it is put into one, it's put into an HOA, the owners of the HOA they can hire whatever management company they want to do it, but if they want to put their homes in a rental, or they want to do a rental in that zone, it's got to be under that one singular management company. That way, our police department's dealing with one group of people, they're not dealing with 30 different, trying to rental management companies. And so, yeah, I don't know how to actually amend the motion at this point, since it's been voted on, if we got to redo it or what.
What I would say is, Mayor, if you'd like to go back and just reopen that up for consideration for an amendment to the motion, and we'll see if it goes. But go back to that same item, just to reopen it, to consider an amendment to the motion, and then Council Bellison can make it, and we'll see if it has legs.
Does that same person need to second that amendment?
No.
You can change that.
Anybody can.
Okay,
So I'm
well-
just remaking the whole motion.
We'll go back to item C, and as
Well,
Council
you can
Starkey.
more welcome say, like, motion as stated with the following added. Easy enough, if you'd like.
Well, then,
Go ahead.
I would make the motion as stated with the amendment that in this project, that a singular management company controls all of the overnight rental activities.
I'll be happy to second that one.
Thank you.
Can you put the smiley face?
Turek, aye.
Nice and I.
Bellis and I.
Granger, aye.
IVI.
Thank you very much. Okay. We already have item D up for discussion, so I don't need to.
If I may, Mayor, it's the
Reiterate.
same request, due west. As stated, it's the 2-week holdover. Again, I'll just cut to the chase. To the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of Z-1704 for the overlay zone request, adding the residential rental short-term overlay zone to the existing multifamily residential R3 designation. And this is to the City Council with the findings in your report. I'll be glad to answer any questions. I think it's.
You want
I
to
think we
start
just.
over the discussion?
No, I think we. Yeah.
I think we flushed the last one out about as good as we could have.
But you still have 30, no, I'm just kidding, questions left.
Well, unless anybody has some discussion they want to do, I'd go ahead and try to redeem myself on the last motion on how I screwed that one up. But I'd make a motion that we approve the ordinance for zone change request Z-1704 to change the zoning designation from multiple family residential R3 to multiple family residential R3 with the residential rental short-term overlay zone, and the provision that any rentals within that zone, that they fall under management by one singular rental management company.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second.
IVI.
Granger, aye.
Bellis and I.
Nice and I.
Turek, aye.
All right,
Now,
thank you.
does this mean that this now becomes a CUP and that we will not see what those plats look like?
Well, I won't say completely, because you will see the plat on one of them, because I know the previous letter C is going to be a townhome project. But I have heard, and I don't know if they made the decision on this particular piece, if it's going to be apartment or not, which means there won't be a plat, but you will see the plat on the previous one, to my
But
understanding.
if it's an apartment, it'll stay under one single owner, correct?
And
It
there
can't
won't be a,
sold
it'll just be a
parceled out.
CUP to the, both of them are going to be CUPs because they're in an R3 and they're over 4 units. But one of them may come to you also, though, through a preliminary plat.
Well, now, wait a second. If it's an apartment, it's one singular owner for the project, right?
Correct. Yeah, and so,
But
yeah,
they just asked for short-term overlay rental, so.
but that one
means that
owner,
one owner
Would have.
to be
That's
the
right.
only sole owner.
yes,
Okay.
and that's what it would be, but, so you're almost
But if
sure
it's
you're going to
single
get your
building, if they want
one,
to sell a single building off, then
then they're
can't.
going to have to
sell
come
it
back
to
and subdivide.
Okay, so what if they say, okay, our intent is we're gonna move forward, we're gonna be the sole owner, but by building two, they say, oh, I gotta get some funds.
Well, it really won't matter to us. I'm just talking, it's going to require then, where no subdivision will come before you, a subdivision will come before you, depending on their
Well,
choice.
I want both the subdivisions to come
Well,
before
that's
me,
where
because
we
I get
have- we
emotional
have to
about
fix-
this one.
We have to fix our policies. We have to
You
fix
know,
our policies,
yeah.
so we see.
Yeah, but it will still be, And if you want, we can always
Do I
send
need to
out
go back
emails
and
and
make
let you.
another motion on that one?
You can't make a
No, I don't
motion, we
think,
have to
no,
change
you cover what
policy.
you're doing, I
That's
think,
policy
so.
changes.
You can't fix that here.
All right.
I like it better being under one owner anyway, to be honest with you.
No,
Oh, I think it functions
Brings
a
in
lot
so
better.
much irritation.
No doubt.
we're going to move forward. Item 12, resolutions. Consideration to approve a resolution adopting the five-county multi-jurisdictional natural hazard mitigation plan, 2017 to 2020. I don't see Gary here.
Pretty sure Casey's actually going to present that,
Okay.
but I was overlooked in that, she's very, very ill.
I don't know.
Probably just need to table again.
I don't know if you guys want to just table it, I don't know.
Let's table it. Yeah, we'll table it for next council meeting.
Mayor, with that discussion, I'll move that we table, come on, get back up there. Where am I at here? That we table item 12, our resolution considering to approve the five-county multi-jurisdictional natural hazard mitigation plan for 2017 to 2020.
Second.
Motion
To
is-
our next council meeting, I guess we need to be date specific? Yeah.
Motion and a second.
IVI.
Granger, aye.
Ellis and I.
Nice and I.
Turek, aye.
Okay, item 13, council business. Consideration to approve the 2017 council members' assignments. You've had to think about it overnight. If there's no additional changes, I'll just entertain a motion to,
Move approval of council assignments as listed in our agenda.
thank
It's
you.
coming in sideways.
I've dealt with that.
So are you.
I'll second that.
Well, do I have a second?
A second.
Councilman Lamy, thank you.
Turek, aye.
Nice and I.
Ellis and I.
Granger, aye.
IVI.
Okay, item 14, anything to report from your assigned committees? Okay. City manager's out of town. I forgot to excuse him. I apologize. He's out of town. Item 16, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
Thank you.
IVI.
Granger, aye.
Ellis and I.
Nice and I.
Turek, aye.
Okay, see y'all Friday.